Hello, I'm Dr. Seth Martin from Johns Hopkins University, a first-year fellow here with the Fitsonthego blog for the ACC Fellows website. I'm honored to be here with my co-fellow Sarah Sandberg, who's first year at Washington University, and two legends in cardiovascular medicine, Dr. Nishimura from Mayo, who will be joining us at Johns Hopkins next week, fortunately. And it's a pleasure to meet you for the first time, and Dr. O'Gara from the Brigham. It's an honor to meet you. What are sort of the highlights of these meetings from back when you were a fellow, and how have things maybe even changed over time, or what would you say to us as young first-year fellows? And we'll start with you, Dr. O'Gara.
Well, thanks a lot, Seth, Sarah, and everyone. I'm really privileged to be here with my buddy, Dr. Nishimura, and I would be really happy to share with you some of my first experiences in coming to a national meeting. I had the great opportunity and privilege of working for Dr. Robert Bono when he was at the clinical branch of the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute in Bethesda. And I worked very closely with Bob, who became my first research mentor in cardiology. And he prepared me to give an oral abstract presentation on long-term outcomes in asymptomatic patients with severe aortic regurgitation. And this all took place nearly 30 years ago. And I'd be happy to share with those of you who access the blog, and certainly the fellows in training, that it was one of the most intimidating but important moments in my career, moving from fellow to faculty and then beyond. Bob prepared me by laying out how it is an abstract is constructed. He rehearsed with me to the point that we became very close friends, and I wondered why he was spending this much time with me. But of course I realized later the reason he was spending so much time was he wanted to make sure I would get it right and that I would be an appropriate ambassador for the science that he had been putting together for the last several years. And Steve Epstein was at the NIH at that time, and it was a wonderful atmosphere in which to learn how to conduct and analyze clinical information, and then how to present it articulately at a meeting. So I remember strolling up to the podium when my name was called for the abstract that was to be presented, and the room at that time was filled because back in the mid-'80s, the oral abstract science presentations were clearly the featured element of each of the meetings. And I looked out over the crowd and said to myself, I'm very well prepared for this, here goes. And I could hear the slides dropping in the projector at the back of the room, one by one, when hitting the button, and then making sure that I got through with my 8-minute presentation. And then I remember distinctly wondering who in the audience was going to stand up to ask a question. And the person who stood up was Dr. Bill Gash, who many of you know as a real giant in understanding such things as the pathophysiology of left ventricular hypertrophy, pressure and volume overload of the ventricle, etc. And he asked me a question about regurgitant volume and whether or not I had taken into account the rapidity with which heart failure might occur in patients with aortic regurgitation. And I remember listening to his question thinking, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer this. What am I possibly going to say? I've been put on the spot, and he's clearly somebody who's a giant in the field, and I wish somebody else would have been able to ask me a simple question. I could have shown an extra slide. But it was one of those moments where I either had to deliver or I would sort of cower in the shadows and say, gee, Dr. Gash, I don't know, we'll go back and do some more research. But just that process of leading up to that particular time and then going through that exercise was forever imprinted on my phenotype over the course of the next 30 years. And Rick and I can talk about how the meeting has changed over this period of time, but let me give it to him so he can share his early experience.
So as Pat said, back then it was a lot of the science, and you really had to prepare yourself. And being at Mayo, I had the Gershas and the Holmes and the Tajiks and the Velitstras and the Fries, and they'd sit down and they'd grill you on every single part of the slide. So by the time you came here, you were as well prepared as everything. But what Holmes will talk about is this time. So you know, we're supposed to be really good educators, and you know, we're supposed to set the example for educators. So Holmes, whenever we give a talk on how to educate, he always comes up with the story about how I went up as a, I don't know, second or third year, you know, had this beautifully prepared talk, gave the talk, I thought I just hit it. I hit a home run. And then, because I was so nervous, I started walking off the stage, but I forgot that there was a lavalier pinned to me, which was pinned to the podium. And as this poor young fellow walks off the stage, you see the podium start to drop just like this in front of 800 people that you were trying to impress with your science. So there's a lot of neat things that you remember, but the meeting has actually changed quite a bit, because the science should still be here, and that's one of the things that David Holmes and Pat and I wanted to do. But now there's a lot of other things, and I think it makes things more fun for you guys to have more of the education, the intermingling, the type of thing we just did.
I think we may close with just more of a personal question. You've both probably been to Chicago a lot over the years, and you know, maybe you have a favorite bar or restaurant picked out, somewhere you're going tonight. Anything that you can give the fellows to help them, you know, have a good time, get more acclimated with Chicago.
Well, you guys probably didn't know that both Rick and I are from Chicago.
No.
Yes, yes. So unfortunately, the list of bars that we know of is too long to share on this particular blog. Kind of depends on what you're in the mood for, right? That great Billy Joel song, you know, whatever mood you're in tonight, right? Bottle of red, bottle of white, or things like that. So I'm particularly, what shall I say, biased around Irish pubs. And then, of course, a close second would be Ditka's, because you can go to Ditka's and you can look at all the memorabilia from the great Bear teams of the past. And, of course, the Bears have actually won something much more recently than the Cubs. So it is a little bit more uplifting to go to Ditka's, which is a real hoot. And I don't think you can go wrong.
Although I must say, every time I come back to Chicago, it's got to be a Chicago-style deep dish pizza and a Chicago-style hot dog. So make sure you get those while you're here.